you listen to the Neil Lamptey Show. My name's Joey, and I'm joined by Paul.
Hello, mate.
And by Neil.
Hey there.
And by Laurie. 4 of us today.
Hi, Joey.
We've decided this week to dispense with the entire football element and just spend an hour arguing and opining about things that we don't know to do with the stadium. So, oh no, wait, we've decided specifically not to do that. Let's start with moments of the week. Paul.
The penalty. It was clearly a penalty. Every fucking day of the week, it was a penalty. It was a penalty. He took him out. It's a penalty.
What did you think about the Sterling one, which was almost the same sort of thing? What do you reckon?
The second half?
Yeah.
I didn't watch the second half.
That's brilliant.
Because goals in the second half don't count, remember? So what's the point?
I was up. We went to visit my father-in-law, and we went out for a meal, and I was allowed to watch in a pub, which was slowly filling up with people who wanted to watch like more important matters, where I was basically told that I could watch the first half, and then the second half would be turned over for the preview of the Man United-Liverpool game. So I got 45 minutes. So I haven't seen the Sterling one. All I can say is the Bakayoko one was definitely a penalty. My knowledge of the second half is the highlights, which I'm sure we'll discuss later.
Neil, what did you think of the Sterling one?
Sterling one, I could see why it would be given, but got a bit of the ball, so I could see why it could not be given. That's my take on it.
I thought with the Bakayoko one, so we have our little WhatsApp group, and on TV, I thought the first 3 or 4 times they showed the replay, I thought the keeper had got a fair amount of the ball, and I sort of sympathised with the ref because I think as much as there are replays that make it really obvious that it should have been a penalty, I think with Bakayoko's back to him, I think it probably was quite difficult for the referee to see. So I don't blame him for getting it wrong, but it was definitely a penalty, wasn't it?
But the thing is, it's either a corner or a penalty. Because if it's a goal,
it's not always the case.
I don't think that's the case.
Ricochet.
In this one, it's clear. In this one, Bakayoko clearly had the ball. He didn't, and the linesman's looking dead at that. Between the two of them, they shouldn't have got that wrong. I'm sorry. It's just he should have got that completely right. Bakayoko was taken out. That was it.
This is what makes me feel a bit weird because like everybody's adamant and you're adamant about it, and you're usually pretty rational when it comes to this sort of stuff. And I look at it and like I keep thinking, has he touched the ball there? Does that not make it a little bit harder than just right or wrong? But everybody else is adamant about it. I don't really like to put my thoughts forward because it feels like I'm missing something major.
No, my only other thing is the fact he's completely out of control, and say he did get the ball first. Bakayoko still, even if he gets the ball second, Bakayoko still got the best chance of controlling the ball because the ball he doesn't hit Bakayoko, he still sort of nudges it away, and then the keeper, who's completely out of control, takes his legs away. So it's just a penalty. And I said I'm normally sort of not that grumpy about these things. That one, it was just a case of that's as clear as mud. I mean, as clear as day. That was definitely a penalty for me.
I think you were right.
And it was just like it was. And it wasn't even like I didn't need 3 replays. As soon as it happened, it was like penalty. How's that not a penalty? And then he sort of pointed because of the camera angle. You're like, he's pointing to the spot.
Yeah.
How the fuck is he giving a goal?
I don't know what he was pointing at. It's like, I'm pointing at that goal kick over there, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I'd celebrated him giving the penalty.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what happened there. Neil, your moment of the week.
What is my moment of the week? It's a CWR watch. So I don't listen on the Friday. They do the phone in, don't they? I feel like that's a direct competition to us. So I don't listen, but I was around my parents and my dad likes to listen to it, and I was listening to it, and that chap Nigel came on, and not to like specifically pick out individuals, but he's got form. I seem to recall quite a few times him going on there and causing a bit of a kerfuffle with the things that he said, and he did it again. He was talking about throttling Joyce Sapala, and I just sort of think, why do they continue to let the guy on when he keeps saying stuff which he shouldn't say, and he kind of has like these mini, I don't say meltdowns, I feel sorry for the guy, but just like it builds up to this crescendo of really getting upset on the radio, and you sort of think, don't allow it. just he's obviously upset about this sort of stuff. So yeah, he came on and said some bad stuff really. And just my moment was actually Martin Winch trying to sort of diffuse the situation, which he was sort of able to do.
I to be serious for a minute, this the undercurrent of, well, not undercurrent, the overcurrent of misogyny involved in this idea of strangle the bitch, I find very uncomfortable.
Well, that's the one thing. So, ignoring sort of the tone of what he was saying, so the fact that he built up to that and that's what he ended up at was like, fuck, where did that come from? But it was almost, I wasn't surprised that he ended up there because just because I've heard him on the radio before, and he always does this thing where he builds up to this sort of crescendo of anger, and you sort of think you're almost at the point where don't give him the outlet anymore. He's almost not. He can't be trusted. Yeah. So don't go with it.
We had this thing, didn't we, a few months ago with Raheem Sterling and them Chelsea fans who were like having heart attacks because they were so angry about him being in their immediate vicinity. And it's another one of them things that gets carried out in the name of football that I don't understand how people think it's acceptable. And I think most people probably don't find it acceptable, do they? But looking on Twitter today, the amount of tweets that I've seen especially from fucking these awful parody accounts, and I'm not saying that all parody accounts are awful, but some of the worst ones, this thing of strangle the bitch is really, really unedifying. And I kind of think all you're doing is showing up your own deep-seated problems there, rather than actually kind of, you're not saying anything other than holding a mirror.
I don't get how he lands there. Yeah. It's just it baffles me how people land there. I get the emotion of the situation, but to kind of get to that point where it's like
Friday night in.
It's like football. Yeah, football it winds us all up, and this people are emotional about this stuff, and you sort of think, well, but how is that your go-to statement?
Yeah,
and just like where did that come from? It was just strange.
Laurie, your moment of the week. You were going to say, presumably you were going to say the brilliant strangle the bitch stuff that's been going around. You had to cross that out and come up with one quickly straight afterwards.
Yeah, I don't know the goal maybe. No. It's actually semi-connected to that in a way. It was, I stuck around after the Luton game for the protest organised by CJ, which was very well carried out. I think it was a good few hundred, probably added to by the fact we got a good result. And just like about 5 to 10 minutes of songs, most of them anti-Sisu to some extent. Some of them are more kind of, I like it much more when we just sing about the club and like what we like rather than just being rude, because I don't know, it just sounds boring, especially when the players were coming over and we're singing we want Sisu out. Can we spend like 2 minutes just giving the players a bit of plaudits because they're about to piss off. So that was enjoyable, but the bit that connects it was that obviously after we'd kind of run out of the 4 or 5 chants we had, the Joy Sapala is a 4-letter word. It just makes the whole thing look really tacky. So CJ does a great job organising this stuff, but can someone at the front just be like, guys, the protest is going so well. When you start calling like the female CEO a slag, it really doesn't make your case look particularly pleasant, and no one's going to have any sympathy for you, or at least no one with a brain. Maybe Strangly Mike will, but just...
The thing is, I know that there'll be people that call us loony, lefty, Sisu apologists or whatever. The problem I've got is it massively, and I think it's what you're saying there, it just undermines your position. Yeah. So actually, we aren't Sisu apologists. I think I'm speaking for all of us when we say that we would be desperate for them to get out of the ownership of the club, the same as every right-minded Cov fan would be. In fact, that's unfair. You might think differently. That's your own prerogative. But I think most people would say it would be good for them to leave the club, like very good. But you completely ruin how seriously people take you the second that you start. It's that kind of sexual swear words, especially where it's women, and you kind of think it's just crass, isn't it? What I will say for my moment of the week is I watched it on Sky, And generally speaking, the quality of the away support was just unbelievable. But the very specifically was it's rare that I've heard an set of away fans so audible, both in volume and what they were saying, and it led to the commentator having to apologise on numerous occasions for the language. And
really?
It's not very often.
What kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's not very often because he didn't. It was just kind of football songs, kind of just whatever shit and wanker or whatever it is that people have said. But maybe 3 or 4 times during the course of the match, he had to sort of sheepishly be like, apologies there for anything that you may have heard from the crowd.
That's great. I didn't realise that.
It was like really audible. I don't know whether it's something to do with Kenilworth Road and the acoustics there or whatever, but it was really loud. But the support just all round was great. And as you say, the protest, I think, we've talked loads in the past about protests and stuff. And do you remember when it was people whistling and was costing us goals and stuff like that? This sit-in is exactly the sort of thing that you think, it's not disrupting what's happening on the pitch. It's not like resulting in stewards getting hit or anything. And it was making the protest and it was making the point in the right way. I thought it was really well put together and yeah, fair play.
And the Luton fans, they stuck around to do their nice little applause as well, which was always nice to see.
Yeah. Anyway, back to more important things of on the pitch. Laurie, we swapped messages after the game. I was a lot more sunny about the game than you were. I thought we had dug in against really high quality opposition, and whilst we'd squandered a goal, once we'd thrown away that goal that was really poor, I felt that we did really well to pull it back, and in the second half we showed the sort of resilience we needed to grind out a draw. You less positive, I think.
Well, I think sometimes you invite me on here, Joey, with the best interest, thinking, oh, while Laurie's been to the game, he'll have some interesting input on what happened. But I think occasions like today, it's really just to make me look stupid, because Kenilworth Road, there are many league grounds where you can't see very much. Kenilworth Road, you can't see anything, like anything. You can't see anything from either side because you're so close to the people next to you. You can't see anything above the opposite goal because there's that horrible thing hanging down. You can barely see the near side because there's so many poles in the way. So my experience of the game couldn't have been more different from the people who didn't go to the game. And I wouldn't really change that for the world, but that's probably why I was quite so traumatized by what happened on Sunday, and probably why some of the things I'll say won't be as they were perceived by other people. But yeah, Luton, I think they're just what a good lower league football team should be, don't they? They play long football sometimes. They sometimes play it short. Everyone, as you'd expect, was very confident on the ball because they're on this crazy run, and they find your weaknesses pretty quickly. So our weaknesses seem to be on this occasion losing the ball high up and them just breaking in an instant. We would seem to be building a little bit of pressure, and then they wouldn't just turn the ball over. They'd turn over and they'd be on us. They also really like passing in between our centre-backs and the full-backs, and that's particularly key for Mason, who probably had... I'm a massive fan of his, but he probably had his poorest game for us from my perspective. He was frequently getting turned inside out, and they have a lot of good wide players. So, they kind of capitalised on that quite a lot. Our front four also, from where I was sitting, things just weren't really sticking. Bakayoko seemed to be quite disjointed and further away from the play than he should be at most times. Bright was being Bright. I wrote about it in my match report. There's nothing new there. I'm sure he was delighted to be on telly, but slowing things down, not necessarily moving the ball to areas of the pitch where we can, and we just looked generally quite nervous. They had this lad called Justin, I think he was a fullback, and his delivery from set pieces was just perfect every time. And they got a lot of corners. I haven't looked at the match stats, but it must have been in the teens because we just seemed to concede so many. And every time, you don't have to do anything brilliant with it. Just every time we were made to defend it. And like you say, Joe, we did defend well, but they were just putting us under a lot of pressure. And we conceded one of those goals that we always concede. just a nothing corner. I think Hyam and Kelly, they both got their men, and then they're running in towards the goal, and then just as the ball's going over their heads, they realise they've both gone for the same guy, and there's just this massive bloke at the back who can't believe his luck.
Do we mark zonally from corners?
I don't know what was going on for those the corners.
They were running towards a man, so...
Do we mark at corners?
Yeah.
I think we do man mark. I think it's just... I think we discussed this in the I think we have quite a lot of smallish players, and I think it must be down to concentration, because we concede a lot of goals from set pieces. Also, what I have noticed different between quite a lot of teams and us is when they get set pieces, they do this thing where they try and put the ball into the box, and they don't pass it beforehand. They just kick it into the box from the position they're in. I found that amazing. I mean, because we had one in the first half, we had a free kick where Luke Thomas, in the sort of position where you're like, swing that into the box. Oh, he's passed it short to someone. It's gone wrong. Oh, that's a surprise.
The zonal thing isn't a flippant comment. There was twice where it appeared to me that the players had kind of just arranged, and I don't mean this being a dick, but they'd arranged themselves with a kind of relative level of distance between each other, and then kind of all just ran backwards. And I wondered whether actually whether that was a thing or whether that just was a coincidence, because it was unclear to me whose man it was that got free, because either Hyam was picking up two players or there was someone not marking Matty Pearson who was 15 yards away from the position that they should have been in. Do you know what I mean? It didn't quite stack up. Either Hyam went with the wrong man or he didn't. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, you know what, Joey, I've never seen a zone score a goal, so if we are doing zonal marking, then bloody get rid of it.
That is that is top class. But and as well is I guess for people who have been very, very, very pro Burge, in the sake of balance, that was an absolute shit show in goal, wasn't it, for their goal? Because
I think. No, just as Burge point in general, I think we have to note that he's going through a bit of a patch at the moment. It's not like, I think up until from the season started until he made that big error before Christmas, he was one of our best players, and he seems to have this crisis of confidence at the moment, and it has been going under the radar. But now Stockdale's come in, did those 2 games, and then disappeared. I think almost there's more pressure now on Burge, and that was almost a bit of a potentially a symptom of that. I think he redeemed himself with some good saves in the second half, but he's not quite the same player as he was early on in the season. That's not just because of one game. This has been kind of building with his kind of nervousness over the last sort of couple of months, I think.
Well, I agree with that. I just think that I don't think he didn't redeem himself with the way he tried to save it. I just don't think that was his ball to go in. I don't think you go to the edge of your 6-yard box to get that ball. So I'm not disagreeing with what you said. I think he's going through a bit of a crisis of confidence for set pieces. But I just think because there's no leadership from anyone, like any of the... I'm a big fan of Hyam, and Willis has had a good season, but when other teams have set pieces, I don't feel like any of those particularly dominate the situation. And I don't think Burge does either in certain circumstances. And I'm not saying that if Stockdale had played, he'd have gone for that ball, because I don't think any goalkeeper would have gone to get that ball. The question is then how he tried to save it afterwards. The biggest issue we've got at the moment is the fact that we are consistently conceding those goals. But you go back to the best goalkeeper we've had over the last 15 years, Westwood. Westwood never went for corners.
No,
he just didn't. That was never. He would try and stop the shot.
Yeah, backs himself to make the save. You feel like that would be a good thing for Burge to do, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
He did pick things out back at last season. He became that kind of keeper, didn't he? Where he was saving the day by kind of absorbing all the pressure by just grabbing the ball from corners. I thought that was one of his things. He doesn't do it anymore, and when he does do it, he looks a bit shaky. I think there are nerves there, that he's not quite the same keeper that he was building into. Obviously, he's shown he can be that keeper, so there's nothing that's happening at the moment sort of stops him from being that keeper. But I just think there's this period where he doesn't quite have the belief in himself to make those decisions. So while that specific example, I think you're absolutely right, he shouldn't be going for that ball anyway, so he should be waiting, anticipating to save it. I think sort of the broad point over the last couple of months is that he is doubting himself more than he ever used to, because things just aren't quite going right for him at the moment.
Laurie, pick it up from there then. So we're 1-0 down against a team who were very clearly on top. We had been quite shaky up to that point, had made some quite rudimentary errors. Where does it go from there?
Well, that didn't really do anything for our nerves. And so people were kind of passing the ball around a bit manically, and it didn't really seem to be settling down that much. But then we had this penalty shout, which I won't spend too much time on, but for my 2 pence worth, I didn't think it was a penalty. Obviously, I thought it was a penalty at the time, especially when the ref pointed at the penalty spot.
Yeah. Quickly
relieved of that illusion by the Luton fans screaming "Wee" in our face, which was nice. And then that injured Bakayoko, but that wasn't clear really from the away end either. So I kind of thought that Robbins had just thought, we're so out of this game, Bakayoko isn't providing what I thought he would. I thought he just made a tactical change.
Really?
Yeah, genuinely. And it was kind of, funny for Bakayoko because a fan had been saved from the away end, like having some kind of like illness or something, he'd gone off in a wheelchair. And just as Bakayoko was being dragged off, this fan was being brought back in to like kind of a hero's welcome. So it really seemed like Bakayoko was getting like a standing ovation for coming off the pitch. But it was absolutely nothing to do. Like no one was even really watching the game at that point because everyone was really worried about this Cov fan coming back. And yeah, I thought that he'd just been dragged off because Robin's been like, right, there's no press up front. We need to do something about it. Let's switch it around. That wasn't the case. But I mean, I could have believed it. So Shipley came on, and it was kind of his kind of game because we didn't really have that much of the ball. So, and he's often positionally quite strong. So as a kind of someone to protect your fullback and like make forward runs when it's necessary was kind of a perfect game for him to come on. And so it proved. Mason put this kind of speculative ball down the channel. Hawula it took a deflection off a Luton player, then a deflection off Hawula. He then went round the Luton fullback, and that's his perfect situation, really, kind of running towards goal, and having to either shoot or pull it back, and he pulled it back perfectly for Shipley, who slotted it away, who, as per, celebrated like he won the Champions League single-handedly. But fair play to him, like when he gets
why not?
I trust him.
Goal, he scores.
I trust him more than most of our players in front of goal. I know he's missed a couple, but you think about the big goals he scored last year. He knows how to find the net if he needs to.
Yeah, I also like that he, like at Wembley, just shoots on sight in some ways. Like that goal he scored, there was a man covering so clearly, but he thought, I'll just fucking shoot. It's Wembley, isn't it? And lo and behold, it was a crap shot, but it took a massive deflection, bowls in top corner. So, yeah, I celebrated that goal. Sorry, Paul.
I just liked the ball from Mason. I like that ball. We don't play that ball enough, where we play the speculative ball on the floor into the channels with someone like Hawula who's quick enough to get there. And that's, I know you sort of very briefly sort of talked about Bright. That's the sort of ball that Bright should be playing quite a lot, and he just doesn't play it at all. And with the players we've got, especially with Hawula on that side, I know he was up front by that point, but still it's that left wing channel where he's in between the fullback and the centre half. The zone you were saying that Luke were playing in. He's got the pace. He's also, he's not a dumb footballer, is he, Hawula? He has got something about him. He does look up. He does have a bit more about him than some of the players we've had in the past. And I think that's probably a ball or a way that we should try to get him in more.
Well, it's the main way. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Well, it's the main way if you are going to play Hawula as the kind of figurehead, the leading guy. That's the ball he really is going to thrive on. You can't play things up in the air to him because I think you probably count on one hand how many headers he won, and that's not his game. But Luton did it the whole time, just they played them on the floor, but mainly they would play these kind of lofted. Sometimes their centre backs would play them lofted balls just over the back of our fullbacks that would kind of rest just before the corner flag. Danny Hilton or Collins go and pick it up, and suddenly you've gained like 50 yards, and we're under pressure, and it's just a clever long ball. I would just love to see us playing passes like that.
You mentioned Danny Hilton there. Obviously, because he's from Cardiff, everyone has talked about James Collins joining us over the years. But did anyone else look at Danny Hilton and think, actually, you're exactly the sort of striker that we could do with at the minute? Like, I thought he was a really cynical, bruising, really good movement, like caused us a load of problems, and ultimately just was... The thing that would mark him out is presumably if he was a better finisher, then he would be playing in the Championship or higher. I thought he had a really good game.
Yeah, I really wouldn't mind him. I can't really think of the last time we had a player like that, because while we had Bastard in JCH, he didn't really have the know-how. He was trying his hardest to be that player, but he wasn't quite that player. But yeah, I would never mind that sort of guy up front for us.
Leon Clark is the most recent example of a really, really top-class absolute bastard like that, where constantly just looking to do whatever it would take to wind the opposition up, as well as sort of be good at the same time. I thought he looked good. So yeah, in terms of the goal, for me, it's exactly what I want to see us doing. Hit the byline, use the pace that we've got out wide, drag the ball back for a player from midfield bursting into the box is what we've talked about doing a million times, isn't it? And again, it's confirmation bias, but you look at it and go, that hit them quickly, go for that, score a goal. It would be really good to see that more often, wouldn't it?
Well, when we talked the other day about our perfect goal, as soon as Bakayoko's gone off, that is, like you say, that is the kind of goal this team is set up to score. It's not set up to score deep crosses flicked into the far corner off the head. Like, it is Hawula making the running, and like you need to rely on the midfielders to be contributing towards our goals, because they're not... Bright's not going to score them. Hawula's going to get a few, but we need more from all over the pitch.
Yeah. Which is why it's all the more frustrating that Bright is so ponderous on the ball. When you sort of think at that point he had players to feed into. You've got Thomas, you've got Bayliss who moves ahead of him, you've got Hawula. You sort of think it's ready made for you to play these passes. And my problem there is I think there are some players who you just can't change. He is the player he is because that's how he feels comfortable playing football. And if you forced him into, heaven forbid, playing the ball a bit quicker, you don't know what that turns him into. And I don't know whether that changes him as a fundamental player. And I just sort of think there's kind of an element of just take him for what he is, and you just have to grin and bear the annoyances. But at the same point, you're like, just fucking pass the ball, mate. It's like, right, just go on.
The thing is that's going to limit him, isn't it? He can only go so far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you can't see it. When we first signed him, you were like, okay, he's an interesting player. There's definitely something there. And being able to drift past players, being able to skin players is definitely a skill, like a very difficult skill to just beat players with the ease he does. But that can't just be it. You can't just do that, because again, he did it on Sunday, where he beat someone and then passed the ball to Mason like 10 yards behind him, and it was that's pointless. And then Bailey tried to play a 1-2 and he just controlled it and then went. And it's just you can't play one pace. You just can't do it. You've got to have another gear, because you're just. As I said at the time, he's basically Sammy Kling. Like, I know there was two Sammy Klingons. There was the Sammy Klingon we first signed, who was good, and then there was a Sammy Klingon who came back from the injury, who was just a different player who played everything safe. And my issue with Bright on Sunday was just try and play a pass that might not work, but might actually be more beneficial to the side.
I think he has got that over gear as well, though, because you see those sort of fleeting moments where he suddenly he kicks into life and he bursts past a player, and you're like, oh, bloody hell, you've got a bit of pace here, haven't you? But he just restricts himself. He seems to prefer to play the other style of game rather than that sort of explosive game, which I think we see pretty much maybe minimum once a game. You'll see him nudge it past a player and sort of kick into life, and then he almost stops in his tracks and he's like, okay, well, I've done that bit now, let's reset. And it's sort of like, oh, you do wonder just quite how much he's got to offer, because I still think he just feels like he plays within himself.
Laurie, we talked last week about his fellow midfielder Liam Kelly, and I've seen some debate on Twitter this week about his sort of performances recently. How did you think he did on Saturday? On Sunday, and more generally just recently?
I think, well, as part of what was a predominantly defensive display of containing Luton, he wasn't really, didn't really have the platform to show the kind of more adventurous side of his play that has been kind of bubbling away in the background recently, alongside his kind of faux Doyle role. But I thought he was great. Just he's always there. He's him and Bayliss are working really well together as a pair, I think. He was snapping in the tackle. Like, it got a bit fiery at one point, kind of about 10 minutes into the second half, and he was in amongst it. And yeah, I think he's doing really well. What's the debate? Like, do people not think he's playing well?
I chipped off on Sunday after the game and said that I thought he was doing really, and I had a number of responses that said, you know, he's whatever, he's not very good or whatever. I was quite surprised, but I would have thought it would have been a reasonably uncontroversial opinion to say that he's been doing excellently well recently, because I just think he hasn't he? I just think he has stepped up to being the leader that we needed to come in Doyle's absence. But actually, I think he's done. Doyle's this amazing figurehead, isn't he? And he can't hope to ascend to the heights of kind of character that Doyle had got. But then equally, he doesn't kick the ball just wildly out of play as frequently as Doyle did. Like he's just a better all-round player. And I think, for me especially, I thought there were times last season where I looked at him and thought, I don't really know what you do. And I thought he was really emblematic of that player that kind of is in midfield but needs to boss it more. And I'm just really pleased at how much he is absolutely bossing midfields at the minute. And even that really difficult one against Luton that pressed so kind of relentlessly, by the end of their game, it felt like he was the dominant midfielder in there. I thought he was great.
But isn't it also he's just one of those players who just do everything? He does the basics well.
Yeah.
So he's not particularly flashy.
Yeah.
Because someone was like, because I made the comment about Brighton. Someone was like, well, I'd rather have Brighton than Kelly. And it's just, well, they're doing two different
pairs,
roles.
Aren't they?
Yeah. My problem with Bright is the fact that he's doing this Kelly role, but 20 yards further forward. The whole point of playing that attacking midfielder role is you are given the license to make more adventurous passes. What Kelly does is he wins the ball and he passes it simply. The other player next to him is lad at work caught a bit of it because he was going to watch the Liverpool Man United game, and he was like, "Who's that kid you got in midfield?" And I was like, listed. He goes, "Oh, Bayliss." He went, "You can tell that kid's gonna go on to bigger things." You know, you're like, "Oh, I didn't think he had his best game for us." I mean, he did his usual thing where he burst past three players.
Yeah, that stands out, doesn't it?
That was nice, yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I suppose even in the high levels that stands out, but when you've watched, and Luton are a good side, there's no denying that Luton are a good side, but they don't have that player who can, you know, they've got quite good passers in midfield, haven't they? They've got quite good users of the ball. But, you know, Bayliss can just really stand out, even when he's not having his best game, just by his attitude to the game.
And Sky love him now as well. So if you think they kind of, after the playoffs last year, they kept starting to focus on him, and then he had those games that he did, and now it's every time, it's young starlet Tom Bayliss, and they'll just focus on him and his strange haircut, and they just give him all the time he needs.
I think that was almost the most impressive thing about Luton, is that they didn't really seem to have any stars. It was just, they were such a unit. Everyone was doing their job to about a kind of 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have really have gone, like, individual players, Collins and Hilton, they're good. Justin, good. McCormack was very dominant in that centre for a lot of the game. But you wouldn't really be like, oh, I must have him in my team. You just think everyone there was just very much on the ball.
There was a new name to me in there. Was it Shinnie? I don't know if you guys...
Andrew Shinnie, yeah.
I liked him. I thought he looked really good. He was
the winger.
Yeah, the 11. He was because he's a new name to me. I'm pretty familiar with most of their team, but I just hadn't really come across him before. And no, he was a new name, and he looked pretty good as well.
What impressed me the both times I've seen Luton, and this is sort of how I would want my football team to play, is they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
That each player knows their role within that system, and they all do it, as you say, really competently. And it's just fluid, isn't it? It's a system that works. What really impressed me about our performance was, sort of agree, we weren't particularly good up until the sort of Bakayoko penalty shout. I thought we weren't playing particularly well. After that, and then including the goal, up for most of the rest of the first half, I thought we actually matched them and not edged it, but were in the game comprehensively.
But when they blew for half time, I was gutted because I was like, we're in the ascendancy here. Like, we are taking the game to them in quite a big way, aren't we?
And the only issue is we still have is our front four they don't click in the same way that Luton's obviously have done, because you still had Luke Thomas having his shots trying to sort of hit the ball through people, and we do have these issues which we just need to develop. I know sort of the playoffs are probably out of reach because our away record form is quite difficult. Our away games are quite difficult. We'd have to win a couple of them. But it's just like, we can play well. We can be a good team. We can be quite organised. That the back six is a good unit. It's just if the front four could click, there's a decent team in there. It's just a shame we only got it for about 11 more games.
I kind of got the sense that it wasn't not entirely by choice, but we'd settled for the draw pretty much maybe with 15, 20 minutes to go. There was no kind of intent to move on and I do wonder if we'd played our natural game, whether we could have gone on and done something. It just felt like they realised that a draw was what they're going for. You started the centre with Burge, you were slowing everything down and everything. But I thought, from a good portion of that match, we were well in there. We were awful to start with, but then after a while, I just thought, there was a chance for us to win now, I thought.
I also think that we offer such a propensity for liability in defence.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
That actually, I'm not sure we can. I thought Jordan Willis played really, really well overall, really well, in fact, and I think he really suits that game where they're under the cosh and he kind of has to get in and muck in without thinking about
concentrate.
It too much. But actually, he then made that ludicrous error to give them that free kick, and that we showed up again why actually our best strategy for defending at the minute is to try and keep the ball away from our goal as much as possible.
Wait, what does he do? Is that when he jumps over their man?
Yeah, just
and
completely.
They get the last minute free kick.
Mental.
It was really, really strange. I don't even think it could have been the sun in the eyes, which I think you could possibly credit to some of the madder decisions in the first 20 minutes. That he just leapt over the guy. It was like he leapfrogged him. It was but then. What was funny about that as well was that on Sky, obviously, you get the benefit of. I mean, I'd have never have known this had someone that knows tell you about it. They'd said they've basically taken this same free kick routine in the last 3 games and scored every time. And I was like, well, I hope we've done our homework. They took it and you were like, we clearly haven't at all, have we? They did it again and it landed perfectly and the guy just missed an incredible chance. But you were like, I guess we haven't been watching their games. What did you think of Willis, Laurie?
Gave me a couple of heart attacks in the first half. There was one moment where he had 2 strikers closing down on him and he was the last man and he tried to take out of his feet and it just caught on the bottom of his studs and they were just like millimeters away from just pouncing on it and he somehow saved himself. But as we all know, he's always got 1 or 2 of them in his locker every game. They dealt with a lot of stuff. Like Luton really pummeled us in that second half. The one where it kind of, we're throwing men at the ball and it's like testament to that, but that one where it kind of squirms past the post after it deflects off Kelly or Hyam, Burge just watching it into the bottom corner and can't believe it when it goes wide. When Mpanzu gets down the left-hand side, another reverse pass, everyone's caught napping, pulls it across everyone. I really thought he should have actually crossed because there were two lads waiting in there, and our defenders as well were sure to just slice one into our own net if he just pulled it across, but he tries to shoot. So yeah, I think like it's a combination of the two, isn't it? Like, I agree with you, Joey. It was an impressive rearguard action. We did have to concentrate, but equally on another day we could have lost that 4-1. But we didn't, which is the important thing. And so you always have to look at the positives of that, because it really seemed like the kind of game where we would crumble and give up. Because really, who's going to tell you off as Cov for losing at the best team in the league? But we weren't going to accept that, and none of the players seemed to think that a defeat would have been okay, and that was really good to see, and especially because of the way they kind of came over to the fans at the end. And Robin seemed absolutely delighted with the performance, because he never comes over to the fans really. He just leaves the players to like go and give their shirts away or whatever, but he came over as well, and it just seemed like the team was very united at the end of that. And wins are nice, but like when you grind out something ugly like that against a really good team, it really felt like a massive point.
For Robbins, it's not about the winning or the losing, it's the grinding out, isn't it, I think?
Yeah.
I think at the root of it, that's what Robbie... I think if we'd have ground out a defeat in that game, he'd have been like, ooh, baby.
But this is why I'm not that worried about our running, because it's rare for us this season, and that's why it was strange on Sunday, watching us play a team who just keep the ball for long periods of time, and we're the ones doing the running around. Because normally that's us. We just don't know how to turn it into goals. But we do seem to, in some way, enjoy that role of being the team who doesn't have much of the ball. So we've got to go to Barnsley, we've got to go to Sunderland, we've got to go to Portsmouth, and we've got to go to Doncaster and Peterborough. So basically the entirety of the top 8. And
is our record that much better against... Because someone else said this, and I was thinking, well, we've beaten Charlton twice. We haven't beaten... I could be wrong. You could go, no, Paul, have we actually beaten any of the other teams in the top 7?
But I'm talking about away. We've beaten Barnsley 1-0.
No, we haven't played Barnsley away. We haven't beat... we've only beat Charlton. We haven't played Barnsley away, have we?
No, at home, sorry.
We're playing Barnsley away in a couple of weeks.
No,
that's what I mean. It's like we haven't played.
Away?
Yeah, we haven't played most of these teams away. We haven't played, a lot of the teams in the top 6, 7. We've only played the once this season. And did we beat Barnsley?
Yeah.
But was it with a goal in the second half, which doesn't...
No, I think our record is pretty similar against all the different bands. I think we've won against the teams in the middle. We beat Southend twice. We've beaten teams at the bottom. I think we've beaten teams up and down the division. I don't think we're particularly great against one level or against one different type of opponent. I think we just, on our day, we can beat most teams and quite a lot of teams in League One. We can lose against the teams as well. I just don't think our record is... As I said, I could be completely wrong. I just don't think our record against the top teams is unbelievably brilliant, because A, we've played most of them at home, and B, we've sort of taken points off teams at the top and the bottom all season.
But that's sort of my point, is that when we go to these good teams away, they're basically untested water, because we haven't played any of those apart from Charlton. We haven't played any of them away from home. It's going to be interesting to see how we deal with not having the ball for long periods of time. And it kind of seems like we might enjoy that, because Robin's, at least he knows where he stands there. He doesn't have to break down a team. We just soak up pressure and then try and take our chances. And if we do,
I don't know if we will always do that, though, will we? It's not our thing this season. Has been keeping the ball, and while that match the other day didn't line up to it, do you think we'll do the same? They're all above us, but the dynamic of the matches won't be set in stone, will they? I mean, we're a good team. Am I making it up? We seem to dominate most matches.
We are a good team, but they're all going to be desperate for points, whereas we're not really desperate for points.
We are. Oh God.
We're an average. we're an average team. That's
I
and I said this before. The reason we have quite a lot of possession is because there are a lot of teams in League One who aren't that bothered about having possession. So we have possession, but that's because the opposition, especially at home, aren't that bothered about. We're not playing against teams who play high level of pressing, are we? The amount of times, because if they were, the amount of times that Jordan Willis and Hyam have an easy pass to each other. If we were playing against teams who are that bothered about sort of trying to stop us, we wouldn't be able to. Burge wouldn't be able to kick it out from the back and pass it straight to Hyam, who can then pass it to Willis. Teams wouldn't allow us to play like that. I think we are where we are. We're 7-8 points outside the playoffs. There's a big gap between the top 6 or top 7, and then there's a gap. Then there's us and a couple of other teams. I think that's where we are this season.
I think we've thrown away a mental amount of points.
The thing is, we say that because we're COD fans, but we haven't watched other teams, and everyone says that, don't they? Everyone says, "Oh, you threw away all these points," but you are where you are at this point in the season. We are 10th or 11th. I think that's just where we are this season.
Well, yes, you are right. That is where we are. But I won't get into it.
In summary, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I'm going to throw over to Dom, who's going to do some Accrington preview, and then we'll come back and see if there's anything else that we need to argue about. Hi Dom, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be on, as always.
Accrington, what can we expect on Saturday?
Yeah, so it's been a difficult period, but one they look like coming out of. Over Christmas going into January, they failed to score in 6 league games in a row. And it was just mainly sort of the result of small squad, limited budget, just sort of the hiccups that you get along the way. They've brought in a couple of decent signings towards the end of the January window, and that seems to have sorted things out. They're unbeaten in the last 3 and scored 7 goals in those games. So they look like they're going to stay up pretty comfortably and, maybe cause a few more bloody noses along the way, as is this sort of Accrington way over the past couple of years.
How big an achievement is it for them to have stayed up this season, assuming they do?
Well, it is huge, just considering the stature of Accrington and the reported sort of budget they work on. I mean, I don't have sort of a whole table of how that compares. I don't have that information on me. But if you consider Accrington Stanley, before we sort of came into contact with them in League Two, and before John Coleman got there, they were really sort of scratching around the bottom of League Two, and were looking like a side who are more or less a non-league team playing in the Football League. The chairman now, Andy Holt, seems to have sort of run the club pretty sensibly within their means, slowly sort of upgrading the facilities around there, but they don't have a proper training ground, for example, and it is quite a big achievement to even be in League One and to be so competitive. A couple of weeks ago, they were 2-0 up against Sunderland, giving them a really good game, and yeah, they're just a very well-run club and very smartly managed by John Coleman.
I thought that Sean McConville was, at the very least, one of the best players in League Two last season, if not not the best. But I think he's stepped up phenomenally well in League One as well. How have you rate? How do you rate him as a player and his performances this season?
Yeah, the two wingers actually have Sean McConville and Jordan Clark are both very good players and very important to their style of football, which generally sort of a 4-4-2 system where they try and work the ball around switching play, building overloads down the flank. So their sort of tactical intelligence and understanding when to come inside, when to perhaps switch wings, when to play in a teammate, or when to go for goal themselves is really impressive. McConville of the two is sort of more direct, got good set piece delivering from open plays, seems to be a more direct and dangerous player, although Jordan Clark is a player I really like watching, very technical player. but maybe doesn't quite have the same end product as McConville does.
And who else should we look out for?
So Billy Key up front is another key cock in their side. He's maybe struggled a little bit with the step up to League One, but ever since they brought in Paul Smith on loan from QPR, which is a really fantastic loan signing, managed to get someone who's played and done relatively well in the Championship last season. You would imagine that bigger League One clubs with more money would have been in for him, but apparently not. And Smith's pace has helped replace what they lost in Caden Jackson over the summer, which is just someone very quick to play alongside Billy Key, who'd be there to link the play. And that seems to have brought the best out of him in recent weeks, and he's sort of getting back among the goals again and linking play. And then in central midfield, a player I'd like to really point out is Daniel Barlaza, who is on loan from Newcastle, who last season went on loan to Crewe and couldn't get in the team, but has come to Accrington and has been a bit of a revelation, really, and really important player in their system in terms of his passing of the ball. He's very good at switching the play quickly, but he's also offers good driving runs to the centre of the pitch. Apparently, Preston were looking at him earlier in the season due to his form with Accrington, and yeah, he's someone who's clearly coming to form, and he'll be playing alongside a sort of physical competitor with either Seamus Keneally or Scott Brown. And then at the back we have Mark Hughes is the leader there, and on one side of their defence at left back I'll have Genoy Donosian, who moves to Ipswich despite not being particularly impressive for Accrington last season. He's sort of someone who sort of kept the shape quite well, especially considering he's a right-footed centre-back playing at left-back. It was a bit of an odd move, but the money they raised from that transfer paid for to help develop their training facilities. So that's and they've managed to get him back on loan because he couldn't get into the Ipswich side. So it's quite a curious transfer, which seems to sort of have worked out well for Accrington. And then at right back, they've got Cam Johnson, who's a very attack-minded player, who's a converted winger playing at right back, and again, someone who's drawn interest from the high divisions.
Speaking of drawing interest from other divisions, are you surprised that John Coleman hasn't drawn more attention?
I think going against him is the spell he had at Rochdale, and in fact, he's had a couple of managerial spells in between his two stints at Accrington, which weren't that impressive. At Rochdale, he was kind of okay. He was replacing Steve Eyre, I think, who had replaced Keith Hill when Keith Hill went to Barnsley. And he just never really seemed to get going there. And he was eventually sacked so that Keith Hill could come back to Rochdale. So maybe slightly, unfortunately, wasn't given a fair crack of the whip there. Went to Ireland, I think, with Sligo Rovers, was sort of a mediocre spell, and then he was managing Southport in then in the National League. I wasn't doing a standout job there, but as soon as he went back to Accrington, something seemed to click. So I think, given what he's done at other clubs, I think that sort of puts people off going in for him. He's possibly someone who just sort of gets the mentality at Accrington and gets on with the job. Whereas if he, when he's been at sort of bigger clubs with higher budgets, he hasn't sort of quite understood sort of the pressure that comes with it. Maybe he's just not suited to it, and just has that right mentality, quite like Keith Hill at Rochdale, where they just seem to know how to run a smaller club.
Perfect. Right. Speak to you next week.
All right. Speak to you then.
Thanks, Dom. Okay, right. We haven't really had any Twitter questions. Paul, your normal call for questions was offset by a separate question about who from the youth team would you like to see between now and May. So perhaps you guys could tackle that one by one. Paul, did you have anyone in mind particularly?
No, not really. It was just more of a throwaway comment, which I really wish I hadn't made, to be honest.
What is that?
It's just because there was like, well, is this for a competitive game? I don't want to just... It wasn't really a case of I want them to be in the first. It was just more of a who's coming through, who's going to be the next player. And then it's like, well, I think we should wait till we're not in the playoff. And it was just like, people were taking it far more seriously than it was meant. It was just meant as a, who's the next sort of taxi rank off the, who's going to come through. It wasn't a case of I want sort of breakdown details of everyone's performance. So fuck it, I'm going to go for Corey or die. I'd like to see Corey or die get given a game, preferably win man of the match, and mention us for sponsoring him.
And score.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck it, why not?
I'm going to go for Johnny Ngandu in name alone. It's just a fantastic name. But in seriousness, I like the sound of gangly, physical, awkward David Bremang. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Is that how we're going for Bremang there? By the
Is he gangly?
Well, supposedly he's really unconventional. So apparently he's a big boy, and
I saw him walking past the away end.
Well, why are you asking me whether he's gangly then? Pray tell.
That was more of a he's not. Okay. I was being polite.
Oh.
What he does love is Lucozade, because he was drinking a Lucozade. And
because he's under the age of 19. All young people like Lucozade. We got 2 members of staff under the age of 25. They both drink Lucozade.
It is delicious. But, I mean, maybe he was like below ground level or something, but he just looks like a tough scrapper. But he looked like dead physical, yeah, so... that's who I was going to pick as well, Joey. I'd be excited to see him because he must be on the bench for a reason. He's smashed them in, hasn't he?
He is, yeah. But I think they'd said that he is one of them players that I think is very much ready for youth team football, but not quite for whatever. And I tell you what, I do. When it comes to it, I don't half trust Farndon and Stevens and whatever else. They've been pretty spot on about things so far, haven't they? So I think if they're saying he's not quite ready, then he's not quite ready. The other ones, of course, Drysdale sounds interesting, doesn't he? This sounds like he seems like he might be quite good. But if you go off kind of reputation alone, Neil, anyone that you'd like to see?
I would rather not for the sake of it. I'm not one for kind of seeing out the season for just to get people games. I would like, actually, this doesn't really count, but I'd like to see a little bit more of Westbrook. I think he's shown quite a nice amount of quality in the times he's been in the team. Also, Josh Eccles. I hear good things. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of him. It might be difficult because he's a midfielder, but he's the other one who's kind of, I think, wouldn't go amiss maybe getting a bit of time on the pitch.
I was just trying to wonder if we'd got a player called Hyde, and then I could make some sort of comment about Jekyll's and Hyde.
If only.
For the academy to sign a player just so that we can make that comment if possible.
And there's also Ponticelli as well. Just the return of the knight. I think just because I think just getting to the feeling that something needs to happen with he was unlucky really because he went to the right club, didn't he? He went down to bottom of the lowest of the low at Mansfield, Macclesfield, sorry, and then got injured and has been injured and not really sort of his career's basically just lost a season, hasn't it? And you feel a bit sorry for him because he did some good stuff last season. He's not, I'd like to see if there is just more of him. Just get the feeling he might be one of those players who, if he gets a bit unlucky with injury at the start of next season, that might be hit with his Coventry career, and you never know where he might go. So it can't be that. I mean, how fit is he or injured? I know he was at training the other day because there was some photos and people were saying that he's there. So maybe he's one of those players who does deserve like cameo appearance here and there.
I think he's also suffered with Biamu's injury, hasn't he? Because he would have been a natural replacement for McNulty in the system that we'd have played last season. But with us playing with largely one central striker, you do kind of need them to have much more of a physical presence or a bit more of all-round play at the very least than Ponticelli does. But ironically, again, at times this season we've just been desperate for anybody who was a bit more ruthless and clinical, and that is him down to a T, isn't it? Is that he took his chances when he got into the team last season, scored quite a lot of goals for the opportunity that he had, but that you, again, like I say, it was, when there were bigger players doing the physical bit to allow him to do his thing.
Worryingly, carry on.
No, I think I was done.
Just you mentioned ruthless there. Robbins is another ruthless one, and that is a worry for me. Because I'd like to see Ponticelli have a bit more time, but you don't know what Robbins is thinking. Whether he's kind of made his mind up on Ponticelli already. I know he's kind of been injured, so you don't want to make that call. But there are a few young uns now. You sort of think he's probably made his mind up already, and that they're not going to move on any further. And I am worried about Ponticelli just because he just doesn't seem anywhere in the picture at the moment, or hasn't been for a while.
Especially with Jordan Shipley's emergence as a first choice target man striker. Any more before we wrap up then, gents?
I would say Callum Maycock is the only person I thought has disappeared. He's down at Macclesfield as well, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Whenever I saw him play, I was always like, he looks like a decent midfielder, but he just seems to drop. I think Bayliss came in and then Maycock was like forgotten about, and he's about 4 or 5 places away from being in the team, isn't he?
Yeah, Maycock has played a lot though, hasn't he, for Macclesfield? I think whenever I've looked, he's been in the first team.
Yeah, he's played
that's good.
Yeah, so I think. Yeah, so I'm not sure. You don't get any feedback. It's hard to go on Twitter and find a Macclesfield fan, isn't it? To go, how's Maycock doing? But in general terms of what you send them out for, he has played. He has got the minutes. Whether or not he's going to come back and be a first teamer is open to debate. But at least he has got that experience this season, which is what you send out loans, isn't it?
Yeah, 26 games he's played for Macclesfield.
That's a fair amount, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, right, let's wrap this up. Laurie, you alluded to your blog earlier. Perhaps you could point people in the direction of finding that.
Yeah, thelonelyseason.club.
Paul, anything to plug?
No.
Deal?
Emphatic.
I'd like to plug Paul.
Hang on.
Yeah, quite. Okay then, thank you very much, Laurie.
Cheers, mate. Thanks.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Cheers, mate.
And thank you, listener. Bye.